So we are at the Experimental Game Lab. This is a Games at Georgia Tech, a sponsored event, graciously subsidized by the GVU Center. And we have Carl Goodman from the museum. It's not American anymore, is it?
No.
The Museum of the Moving Image, who is the executive director and has worked here for like 20 years or something.
Since opening day in
Like
1988.
that. Since the 20th century. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the museum and what they do. And I want to mention, just before you do that, the Museum of the Moving Image was originally started as a film museum, correct?
Film and television. It had never been. There was a museum of television and radio. Our founding director felt that we shouldn't have a name that boxed us in, and that according to newer and at the time current scholarship, people began to think of movies and TV as, and this was shocking at the time, related. Rather than, no, because it's a completely different industry, different people. Television was thought of as a backwater, of course. Completely separate technologies. Television is electronic, film is photographic, and film is older. So older usually means more dignified. You know, they get bragging rights. Television is thought of as superficial. Television is also real time in a certain way, real time passive, like film, but more like radio in terms of how it gets to people. And film, the majesty of the cinematic experience could not be matched by a little box in one's home. So for us the term moving image came from a British writer, theorist named John Wyver, W-Y-V-E-R. That's how we can trace it. He did a series of books called The Moving Image. He's in the UK. And then about a year or two later, 2 museums of the moving image were formed. One was in London, came out of the British Film Institute, and one was in New York. They were first.
And why is it Astoria?
So we were the American Museum of the Moving Image because about 2 months earlier there was a Museum of the Moving Image. Once they closed, we jettisoned the word American because that's what Americans do. We're opportunistic, and they were too big, too fast, and a little bit. They had a more of a theatrical bent to them. So, in talking about the early days of cinema, you're familiar with the Lumiere brothers and that moment when the train was coming into the station and everyone in the audience got up and ran. So, for us, that would be in the text. There would be probably we'd show the film, but what they did is recreated the event. So you have actors running out of the theater, right? So it was very different, like Colonial Williamsburg. Anyway, we were a little more clinical, and in 1988 created what we call a core exhibition that made the statement, right, that film and television have maybe distinguished from each other in their history, but were coming together.
But you included animation too, which was...
Well, sure, that's part of the book, but again...
But that was kind of radical at the time.
Well, and the philosophical grounding was there, especially with the term moving image. It also encompasses things that haven't yet been invented, and which is a really useful thing for us.
Yes.
Because we can embrace what's to come. It's interesting, the Museum of Modern Art is a specific period in art history, and they're no longer just a museum of modern art, but they're grounded in modern art. There may be some time when there are certain things that we wish we could be about that we can't because the term moving image is too limiting. But right now, for instance, internet-based media, social media. If we could call ourselves the Museum of Dynamic Audio-Visual Entertainment, we probably would. But that would limit us. But in any case, it's something we had to explain to people over and over again. What is a moving image? And today, what's interesting is we don't have to explain it. It's still hard to define, but you don't have to. because people kind of, younger, especially younger people, kind of know what it is, but it's not heretical. So in any case, we went even further afield in 1989, our second year, and I came on opening day as the
There's
kind of
chairs here, you can.
as the computer guy. What I was doing was doing music for film and theater and dance when I graduated from college, and I was using a computer to do it, and it was used to be called computer music, actually, and very rudimentary. There was a $100,000 device called Fairlight Series 3 computer musical instrument, and it was one of the very first digital samplers.
I know what it is, it's awesome.
And it used, I mean, the whole thing was just incredible. It's sort of almost a mainframe operating system. And I knew how to use it because I was fortunate to go to a college that had one. But also, I'm a composer, so I could actually make music with it, and I love composing music for other stuff. So they brought me in to develop a program about how computers, we didn't use the word digital, were changing the way in which movies and television programs are made. And the way it had changed at the time was really in the realm of sound and music, not imagery. Because computers at the time, sure, they were experiments of real-time graphics, but to digitize a moving image, or to even dish one out at the frame rate you need, computers just couldn't do that.
They couldn't do it yet.
And so, just like the internet impacted the music industry before it did the film industry, digital technology impacted the way music is made. Also because of a protocol called MIDI. Does anyone know what MIDI is? That was revolutionary at the time, and I was lucky because I was in high school and I started hooking stuff up, and the whole concept that you can send data that describes pitch, duration, and volume, maybe a little bit of other, I forgot what they were called. You can assign things that were in the synthesizer, but have to do with timbre, FM synthesis. It was fascinating because suddenly you could hook stuff up and control the synthesizer with a computer, and again, it wasn't sending the sound itself; it was sending data that controlled the sound of another device, and it was very simple. There were 60 channels, there were 127 values per channel. Anyway, really great way to learn stuff. And so those of us who talk about how hard stuff was back then to do, what was good is it was so simple that it was easy to learn with. And I bet you some professors actually forced people to learn that way. So when I was in college, before I even touched a digital sampler, which was an exotic instrument, I was cutting and splicing tape, recording sounds, and then literally with a razor blade to create. Well, it was people like John Cage who was making these tape loops that were very physical, analog. It was great. So I was able to get this job, which was great, and I knew something about computers, and it turned out that was the director asked me to think about a curatorial position that would have to do with computers and the moving image. And she even gave me, she said, take a year. I had to do other stuff. I had to set up a network, which was computer networks at the time. Amazing. Token. Anyway.
Yeah, I remember.
I'm aging. Bob Metcalf, who invented Ethernet, who was up in the, and what was great is you can call these people up, but that's a whole other story. And then there was this thing called they were calling multimedia. Remember this?
Oh yes, I'm going to write a book about that.
Good.
The golden age of multimedia.
And so for at the museum, the focus was, I decided that my job should be about two things. One is to look at interactive media, as I decided to call it, as a subject area.
You made that up
right.
yourself, didn't you?
No, I'm sure it's not there. No, we had to choose.
I know.
Interactive doesn't quite work, but at the time. And also use it, because museums themselves, as educational institutions, could benefit from using these technologies in its exhibits. So we designed a whole series of interactive exhibits. I don't have pictures from that. Mostly use HyperCard to control laserdisc players to allow people to interact with and create moving images.
I remember. all those things.
Yes. So 1989, in conversation with the director of the museum, we decided, let's do video games. Now, one of the reasons why was because we had this third floor of the museum that was not developed yet because we ran out of money. And so the idea was, let's look at the history of video arcade games and put them on the third floor. It's really simple. We called the exhibit Hot Circuits.
Is that what's on the screen?
And that's, right, so this is, I'm looking at it now, I'm going, ooh, that kind of sucks. But at the time, it was really exciting. I mean, there's too much space. And
It's in a museum. And this was what year?
1989. But, so we worked with who do we find to write about? We found a guy named John Burton, who was a research graphics specialist at the Ohio Supercomputer Graphics Center. And then a guy named Roger Sharp, who was a sort of in-house historian at a company called Bally Williams. And they helped us figure out which games to acquire. They were cheap. And we put them on display in this very simple way, which is chronology. And we chose arcade games for another reason, which is, and this is a problem dogging this field of exhibiting video games, because they were objects. So museums show objects, it made sense. And also they were really, you could play them quickly and learn how to play them quickly, right? In a museum setting, you don't have time to master a complex interface. And so I think museum exhibitions of video games have been and probably always be biased towards games that have a certain level of simplicity to them. And then of course there was the nostalgia factor. So there were a whole bunch of reasons why basically the idea of exhibiting video arcade games preceded the decision to do an exhibit about video games, if that makes any sense. It was more, the interest was in arcade games also because if you look at film, and this is sort of not completely true, but Edison's inventions were first experienced in what they call penny arcades. You did not go into a theater and watch a movie with other people. In fact, Edison, he was a good businessman in some ways, but he didn't think that people would want to sit in a room with strangers and watch a film projected. There were projected films at World's Fairs and county fairs and so on, but he felt that the idea it has to be personal and intimate. You put a coin in the slot, there's this machine that runs the film loop, and you watch it through a little peephole. That's called a kinetoscope. That was made in the late 1800s. So Edison started a business opening kinetoscope parlors, and he didn't get it right, obviously. But so that's a whole other story. But the point is that we drew a parallel between the earliest days of film, which began in sort of as intimate one-on-one experiences in public places, and the early days of the arcade. And that was sort of our justification for going into video games. Over here on the left, you have this wonderful game called Computer Space, which was Atari's first game, Roland Bushnell's game before Pong. And it was essentially a bad version of a game that started at MIT in 1962 that was created at MIT by students called Space Wars. So we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, most of these guys have taken my class which has this in it and that.
Cool.
And I think that and that.
And obviously, this was 1989, so the display of games went up to 1989.
You didn't have games from the future?
But also, not quite. Yeah, there is a game that was that students tricked up in Stanford in their lunchroom that was coin operated. That was around the same time. There's a little bit of a battle going on in terms of what was first, but it wasn't a product, so that was different. But you notice very simple, which is there's a game and then there's a piece of text. And by the way, we learned later on that a lot of the text was just completely wrong, but we didn't know enough to know. I mean, we even got Space Wars date wrong, and there are other things. I mean, and I wasn't yet. I wasn't involved. I was mostly publicizing the exhibit, but I wouldn't have known either, and the public didn't know things about the underlying technology of the games that weren't quite right. We missed a whole. It just wasn't that great, really, if you look at it. but it was the only thing out there like it. And so I think the real statement that it made is, look, video games in a museum. Isn't that cool or weird or great, or depending on how you felt. So it wasn't what we were saying about the games themselves as much as the fact that there were games in a museum.
Exactly.
And
which
that
is
was,
exactly why I wanted you to come and talk to us.
But that, again, we're over that. We're way over that.
Oh.
So what I want to do here is I can try to get my little folder up.
Let me get it.
And because there is no way, see on a PC.
There it is.
The arrow key.
At some point, I wanted to,
Some other pictures.
oh good, those, you painted the walls.
No. So
It's just
this is
lighting?
1993. So from after 1989, which is a lot of games in a dark room, and even our PR person got this wrong. She says it's from something called Hot Circuits. This was actually called, I don't know what it was called. But this is when I started to be curator, like who actually knew something in this arena. What we did, you don't see it here, is we actually looked at the interweaving histories of the console, computer, and arcade game. And one thesis was that innovation has moved over from the arcade game into the home. It also postulated that there were that the computer game and the console game really had very different roots. And in fact, I got a hold of this guy named Ralph Baer. I don't know if you should Skype him in.
Yeah, this is like the who's who of my lectures.
In
my
his
class.
basement in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
which is wood paneled. He's amazing. Who invented the home television-based video game, and then going back to the Space War guys, totally different. Who were creating games for mainframe, or they called them mini computers sometimes, in computer labs. Very different types of people, very different types of games. And so again, you don't see it here, but the idea was a little bit more evolved 4 years later. Still grappling with the fact that that we really can only show the games that we were biased towards games that were simple to pick up and play. One of the things that we did show Eliza the computer psychologist at this exhibit. Is anyone familiar with that? Yeah, you could probably put it on your mobile at this point. And again, the idea, for me, that was a form of interactive entertainment. It might have been research, but there was something surprising and exciting about interacting with this bot, essentially. And it's very, very few lines of code. And we also showed something called Life. Oh man, I don't even remember.
Conway.
From John Conway, and this whole idea of sort of generative graphics. That's hard to describe, but we felt that these were
I
sort
think
of
everybody
two
knows this is a digital media.
grounding.
program.
Yeah, but I'm even forgetting. This is so long ago.
Yeah, I know. It's history now. All the stuff you're talking about is history.
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was definitely not. There was nothing like this. There were no academic programs about this. There were people in research labs writing this kind of software, but no one was studying it even as a sort of, kind of humanities subject, whether it's social science, social studies. So let's see what else. So yes, there was a section of this room that was about contemporary games, and we switched them. So the main exhibit didn't change, but then at the back of the room we showed new stuff, and it was amazing how, again, at the time, the focus is on, if you don't know, this is not for the fans. I don't even know I don't know what these are. My love is for a platform called the Sega Saturn. Actually, there's some amazing games that came out for it. If anyone ever played, there's a game involving a fish with Leonard Nimoy's head. You know what that one is? We have it in our collection.
I remember
It's
that.
just a disaster. But also a game called Space Channel 5, which is a genius game that you can't really play. Maybe it was ported.
Dreamcast.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That was the Dreamcast, not the Saturn.
That's right.
And then the PlayStation 1, the game that really got people going was Parappa the Rapper. Really beautiful, interesting new type of game. and the weird thing was showing them at the time they were coming out. So there was no historical perspective. We were trying to expand people's ideas of what they consider a video game. And then, we did something with when Doom came out and Myst came out, we showed the two kind of side by side, so different yet came out at the same time. I'm a Doom guy, and we had
I'm a Myst guy.
Yeah, so we had other curators who
Duke
were,
it out.
yeah. And so what I found amazing with Doom was just how malleable it was, and we showed maps that essentially people had created. So you have the first person perspective, but there is this all these people creating these maps, and it was also again very visceral, easy to play, and so on. And we just avoided. We'd love to show SimCity, but my God, what is that? What do you do? How do you, and we just sidestepped the issue. Certainly Zork, with the text-based computer game. Actually, we started with Adventure, which was actually called Advent at the time because I don't think they could put enough characters in the name or something. I mean, it was amazing. And again, for certain people, it's nostalgia, but for me, it wasn't, and for the general public, they're fascinated, more so than with early film. Interesting enough, the kids found it fascinating. The students who we bring to the museum, that these video games were they're older than they thought, and so simple. And it was really interesting to see how kids and parents interacted in these exhibits, because it gave them the parents could say, oh, I played that when I was younger, and there was a conversation going on. In the home, the kid retreats, the parents leave the room, the kid's playing a video game, or the kid's in his room or her room. So in a communal setting, it's more likely that a conversation, a meaningful conversation among the people in the exhibit can emerge. And we saw that and heard that all the time. This is also mislabeled. Okay, so let's see. This is labeled correctly. Okay, so it's great. I just asked someone for pictures, but there you have it. Really, the museum sees a very wide range of people, and people are willing to do and try things in this environment they would never do elsewhere, and really enjoy themselves. Keeping these things working.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And what's interesting about this Donkey Kong, one of the things we learned about our video games is actually they weren't authentic, a lot of them. Again, when we exhibited them, we didn't know that much. So here's Donkey Kong. It turned out the sound, the motherboard was different. The soundboard was gone. The joystick, or the interface, which is actually, the buttons were not, these buttons were not correct. The joystick was not correct. It was a bit of a Frankenstein's monster, because when they're shown in arcades, this is what happened. The parts are replaced. So we worked with somebody who, and the decal was counterfeit, on the side of the cabinet. As this develops as a discipline, you learn these things. And someone we worked with came in and acquired all those original components and worked with us to restore, to its original condition. And where do we learn about these things? From people. It's not an institutional pursuit, even at this point. It's collectors. Individual collectors know a lot more about this medium than people at museums do at this time. It hasn't been institutionalized to the extent that others have. I'm going to jump now to the exhibit we did last year. I want to show the contrast.
This was, just so people know, because I did an IndieCade debrief yesterday or Wednesday. When was that? What's today? Yesterday, which is also Wednesday. Last year, this showed concurrently with IndieCade East.
And we, it came out of a conversation with John Sharp, who used to teach here.
That's correct.
Hang out here. Yeah, he taught me now.
Yes.
And in his, I called him and said, we need to do a game exhibit, and I'm not sure exactly what it should be. He said, well, the 50th anniversary of Space Wars is coming up this year. Like, aha. And then we were on it. And he put together with us this very focused exhibit called Space War, Video Games Blast Off, and that's marketing, by the way. You know, just we want, if we called it Space War, no one would know what the exhibit was about. And what's interesting is, at this time, it was there. MoMA started collecting video games. There were other exhibits. You did something like Irvine, actually, and that was a little more in the art.
That was in 2003.
Art realm. But generally speaking, you know, we wanted to do something very focused with a very clear curatorial point of view and get beyond look at video games in a museum and look at something very specific, which in this case was the way in which this very early computer toy, which is what its makers called it, influenced and even set the stage for the development of video games that followed, especially looking at the theme of space as a setting for video games. So it wasn't just a historical exhibit about space war and the people who made it and so on. We just started with space war. Now this is a controversial thing. It's a recreation. We couldn't cart the deck PDP-1 over to the museum. And my feeling is that you can have AMMI. You know, there's as you probably know, there are a lot of ways you can show a video game that's not the original, but gives you an idea of what the game is about. But it's, you know, for instance, our computer space, the monitor was not the original monitor. In Space War, the code is actually the original code, but it's emulated and basically shown on it was almost made of like cardboard, but it's not exactly, a replica of the original deck PDP-1 vector screen, which is a riot. I mean, if you look at that thing, obviously it's circular like the Earth, you know, flat like the Earth. Oh, yeah, someone told me it was round recently, and the teletype and this wonderful little interface, and it worked, so people could play it. And the great thing about a recreation is, on the museum end, it's kind of important. You don't want to destroy something by exhibiting it. It allows people to actually play with it, and as long as we label it properly as a historical recreation, and that's what we did. It was a subject of a tremendous amount of discussion among the staff. We have an in-house curator of digital media now, and he was responsible for getting this made. Jason Epic.
What sort of computer was that being emulated on?
It's PC, and that's a good old-fashioned monochromatic. I think the technology at the time was believe it or not, CGI. You know, they're sort of 1980, 1990, 88, 90, 8086 IBM PC. Again, it along with pictures of the original. And by the way, a little bit about the inspiration for the game, including pulp science fiction, Lensman, and what was the other? Oh yeah, my favorite, which is their manifesto, the three who created Space War.
Hingham bought from the Institute for Space War.
Well, it was Hingham.
Hingham Institute for Space
So that's
Warfare.
like I'm sorry, your streets have numbers, but it would be like the Peachtree Institute, because it was actually the name of the street that their lab was on. So they called themselves the Hingham Institute, and they wrote the theory of the computer toy, and it had 3 tenets. And again, it's now that I'm the director, I get to forget all the things that curators get remembered. But one was that you should tax the capabilities of the system to its upper limits. The second, essentially, is that it should be in they call it a runtime environment. I mean, it really should be interactive. And the third is it should be fun to play like a game. And we also learned that they were developing this as a response to something that Marvin Minsky developed at MIT, which was called the Minskytron. Marvin Minsky is a legend in the realm of computer imaging, and at the time what people were doing was creating software programs that showed graphics on the screen being drawn in real time. And they were very psychedelic in a kind of, vector graphics kind of way, and you watched it and you went, wow, and it was great. But these guys are saying, well, you're not really using, it's entertaining, but you're not really using the computer in the way you could if you made something instead that was interactive and game-like. So, I mean, there's a very, very fertile environment for working in God and so on at MIT, and it was all men, of course, and they had lunch hairdos, and there were great pictures of these people, and it conforms to every stereotype you can imagine about pocket protectors and so on. And of course, this all comes from military technology, so who would be surprised at that? It's amazing we survived. So let's see. That's boring. But what I wanted to show you, so now we took some of our collection and focused on the games related to space. And what's interesting is to go from Space War to Computer Space, which was essentially a productized version of Space War that wasn't very good, to something called Space Wars, made a number of years later. It was the first time they could take vector graphics, real vector graphics that were in expensive systems, and turn it into a consumer product. That also came from MIT. Someone named Larry Rosenthal, whose PhD was, it was to develop the circuitry to allow for vector graphics systems to be produced at a low price. And it was very popular. And then finally to asteroids. And it shows a very interesting progression. And on the education fund, it's a great way to also talk about game mechanics and play patterns and so on, just to sneak that in the tour environment. Right, there you have actual people. Yeah, so this was a lot of fun. And then the other thing we learned is let's take some games that are, how do you show the console games? And you have to show them on a TV from that period, right? Like, well, let's do something fun. Let's blow it up, let's make it really big. And we had 3 projections. One of a game called Yar's Revenge, which was really lo-fi from the Atari, and a very early space game. All the way up to, I think the present day game was, the time we changed the newer games, was Mrs. game is Izagachi. He made Reds, but this was Child of Heat, thank you. Which was, in a way, I mean, is it outer space, it's inner space, but it was a really interesting contrast, and a lot of fun for people, and something they haven't seen. It didn't get the attention. And then we looked at the physicality of games was important. We found a sort of motion platform-based game made by Sega all the way in the 90s, and it's in our collection. So you see here we're branching out to a different kind of display where we're not just lining video games up in a row. And the visual style here, the text panels were on these kind of triangular, angular, vector-y looking panels, and the desks were also, I don't know if you can see that, these sort of triangles, and try to extend the world of the game out into the space. So, whether it's successful, I mean, it is sort of an evolution of our thinking. The Virtual Boy, the Nintendo Virtual Boy, really wonderful system. And so Jason would be very proud of this. First of all, she put her iPhone down, and she's carrying her baby.
That's a great picture.
But we had to spend a lot of time to figure out how do you lock this shit down. And instead of saying, we can't lock it down, so we won't show it, we took it as a challenge. And also,
I have to say, in the show that, I guess it just caused, but in the Essential show, people couldn't play Bumpy's Party because of the remote being tethered, because you have to spin around and.
Oh, it was terrible.
It was
yeah.
a problem.
Well,
Anyway.
I'll tell you what our limitations were there, and also iPads and stuff. I mean, that's not. I don't know if that is an Osmos. So
maybe.
more sort of levels of
But this is
abstraction.
this isn't,
Yeah, something else. Here's, I think, a better picture of the space. All right.
sorry, that's the booby trap chair.
Ouch. By the way, and this thing cost us $25,000 to do, and we're really proud of that. It doesn't mean anything to you guys probably, but it's not a lot of money. It's like when someone says nice shirt, and you say, oh, it was $10 on sale. So my wife always tells me, no, you don't tell them how little it costs. You want them to think it costs something. But I'm really proud of how little money we had.
Yeah, no, it's great. I know exactly what that means.
So the graphical style, again, really, by having an exhibit have a personality, rather than just, hey, look, it's video games. Here's the driving genre, here's the flying genre, here's the, this is, we had a section called Death from Above, of course. And these were all organized in a very specific way. A certain number of games really had to do with understanding how games can simulate rules of physics, and again, trying to connect things to some educational topics as well. So here we get to this year. So we decided to go all in with Indiecade, and I know Celia probably has talked to you about the history of Indiecade, but last year, not this year, we finally figured out a way to try to bring Indiecade to New York City in a different sort of New York-y version, and far reduced, called Indiecade East. And the Space War show happened to be up at the same time. They were two really we put Space War together and then felt, well, wouldn't it be great to try to get Indiecade to New York while Space War was up? So year two.
I should also add that John Sharp, who is the curator of Space War, has been the conference co-chair of Indiecade for the last 5 years or something.
And you have to, that was a complete coincidence.
I know.
It's amazing. It's a small world still. So you guys, I hope you like each other, because you're going to know each other for a long time. No, it'll change a bit. So here's the challenge. The second year we said, okay, let's actually use the third floor gallery space to show independent games and do an exhibit on independent games. I think our staff had a slightly different view of what an independent game is than the people at Indiecade. It was really interesting tension. So, like, for us, Angry Birds can be defined as an independent game at the time that it was made.
We call it an independent game.
Well, people we were dealing with at Indiecade were a little...
Well, the New York people.
Yeah, maybe. So Minecraft qualified.
I'm always talking about Angry Birds being an indie game. I think that's a great story.
Yes, even if it sucks. I mean, it doesn't suck. And, but it's actually,
No, but I mean,
sorry, Flappy Bird sucks. Flappy Bird sucks. The thing about Angry Birds we found interesting, we wanted to do a version of it without the animal characters. It just showed the physics of it in a way, and the abstraction of it first, and then, and actually for our education programs, it's a very good game to play with, because it is, beyond, it's simple. Its game mechanic is quite simple, and yet it's the fact that you have these silly creatures and shooting a bird at a pig. I forgot exactly what you're doing, but rather than just these shapes, it's really it has a lot to do with its appeal. In fact, for me, it reminds me of a game, one of my favorite video games called Boom Blocks, which is much more physical, and you also have the dancing, annoying animals that you can mistakenly hit with your blocks, except that's, of course, the best part. So anyway, we decided to call this exhibit Indie Essentials. We lobbied with Indiecade that it shouldn't just be the winners of this year, but it should go back in time to kind of select some of, to show a selection of important indie games from the past, starting at a certain point.
Why did you start? We were talking about this yesterday. Why did you start
With Alien Hominid?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a real give and
Because
take.
there
We wanted to go way
were
back.
earlier ones that are really significant.
Well, we should have brought you in as the curator. Jason felt the same way, but I think no, you bring in. Look, it was a collaboration, and we had some nasty, crazy ideas, I'm sure too. But in the end, there were a number of curators working together, and they decided, look, we weren't going to have old games at all. So they started with Alien Hominid, and I think what was interesting to the
Can
curators.
I want to open the pictures.
Yeah, well, I only have 4. So here's another example. So Everyday Shooter, which we all agreed on, is it got more space than other games because it's so beautiful.
It's a
Right?
beautiful game.
It's not fair, but we projected
It
it really,
shows well.
and also now projectors cost a lot less money. We know how to play with lighting. Try to make sure it doesn't look like a trade show. And when you go to E3 and you play the Indicate games, it's great because it's E3, or it's terrible because it's E3. But I mean, a lot of people involved in the industry are there. But it's it's a brightly lit kind of environment. There's no differentiation. So it was really fun to play, just to play around with blowing some of these games that are not a lot of pixels there, but to blow them up and to be immersed in them. And this worked really well. And we also felt with sound. Sound is a huge problem. Now you have a big room and you have a whole bunch of games, and they're all going to fight each other for your ears. So we decided, what I decide is I say this issue should be dealt with and maybe think about having a dominant soundtrack in a certain area that want to annoy the hell out of people. And then other ones in that area you may want to use headphones or something else. Sound.
That's what we did at
sound is a
XYZ
bitch.
too.
Yeah. So this one has this lulling music that and you probably heard guitar music, and it was almost counter to the electronic sounds you associate with games. So it worked out. So the curators decided again how to show and where to show, and the way they could be displayed. That was one. Let's see what girl at console. Okay. So again, this is right. This is the default display that we did. I think it's a 32-inch screen, and they're headphones that.
But I have to say that it's really interesting to look at this in contrast with the earlier pieces.
Right.
Because first of all, look at how the lighting is very dark with these little sort of jewels of light throughout the space, as opposed to that first one, which is basically just like
That's
a
right.
warehouse.
Yeah, it sucked. I was looking at it now.
So you can see the refinement of exhibition technique over time through this whole series.
And the text had a
You're
real
going to
nice.
just talk and indicate, that.
Had a
right?
really nice
I'm
graphic
gonna
one.
have
I tried. It's pretty esoteric.
No, not for that.
You see the graphics. Well, I'll do a real presentation. And the graphics, the graphical style, we established a kind of vibe for the whole show. It carries through into all the signage, but you don't want to upstage the games. That's the other issue. What was amazing is I thought, Braid is a great example. No, so now we have games that are fairly complex to learn and to play, and I realized how addled my brain is, because the people who are really grown up playing video games could pick up and play this stuff. They understand a certain base level of convention. And what was nice about most of these games is they subvert those conventions just enough to make it interesting, but not frustrating. And that's sort of key, I think, with a lot of these games. If
Well,
you
lots
really
of
want
people would
more
sit.
ways to play them.
I saw people up there sitting for long periods of
Yeah.
time playing this
The
game.
game that sucked me in was Quadrilateral Power.
Mhm.
I never played it. I don't know if you have that lying around.
No, you got it.
But I have a thing for games about games, games about computers.
Yeah.
Because film and television have already gotten very self-conscious, and oftentimes you're watching a movie that's about movies because you have people who study film and are now, referencing films, good films from the past, in their movies, or movies in which a movie is being filmed.
Yeah.
And same with television. The whole idea of a character suddenly talking to the camera, recognizing it in a television show. So I was always wanted to start seeing that kind of consciousness in games. One of the things you rarely do in a video game is play a video game. Minecraft was a bitch because it's internet based, and so people kept trying to log in. We actually had to disable certain features. And what was great about the indie games is you can actually work with the makers and say, can you create an exhibition version of your game? Now, it's a little tricky, but in many cases they helped us make the games more robust for exhibition. And you can't do that when you talk to Electronic Arts, know, Rockstar Games.
Yes,
It
I
is what it
know.
is. So
Try showing League of Legends in a museum. Good luck with that.
right, no, thank you.
We did that at XYZ, and it was a frickin' nightmare.
What is the, sorry, it's made in Europe. It's a MMORPG, space game. Eve Online.
Eve Online.
Thank you. We just said, you know what?
No, you do not want to put that in a museum. That is a bad idea.
Right, but it's a significant game.
I know,
So,
but you
you know,
can't.
that's the question. So in here, again, people kept trying to log in with their accounts, which they would. They'd get in, but then they left, right? So, because the people, so many people in Minecraft, they wanted to start playing it, you know, from using whatever assets and, you know, that they've built up. And the novelty here, again, the theatricality of it, there's something really different about playing a game on a giant screen in a kind of social, performative environment. It does become a performance, and other people gather around and watch you play. And if you're pretty good at it, you know, it becomes like a spectator experience.
Base team!
Yeah. So again, locking them, and I'll tell you, you gotta do it. It's
No,
you
and you
really,
know, this is one where you have to shake them, so
Yep.
you have to have a long enough tether. Oh my God, what a nightmare.
But what's amazing is everything survived. Some things crashed, and we did. And by the way, the whole idea was we didn't know what we were doing. With all these exhibits, it was, boy, we have these challenges. We have no idea how we're going to overcome them. Let's see what happens, rather than only go with what we know we can handle. And that's changing now, because now people expect a lot more from us, and from games, and from game exhibits, and we help create that problem for us, and so, or for ourselves. And now we can't get away with what we got away with before. But what we're going to try to do is to have, again, we do exhibits about everything. I mean, we had an exhibition about Jim Henson that was hugely popular, you know, doubled our attendance. Believe it or not, an exhibit about Breaking Bad. It was huge. Right when the show was culminating, and we had to kind of wait for the show. Everyone came to the theater and watched the final episode. And it was, you know, gut-wrenching in so many different ways, and they wanted to commune with each other. But that's the other thing that happened. Television usurped film in a way. I hate to say, as a medium in which creators and artists can make very, very rich and multi-layered work. Television. If you look at the depth of some of Mad Men, everyone has their favorites. The Killing is mine, but on cable, produced for very little. Not exactly indie, but in a way, if you look at AMC and these upstarts, and now what Netflix is doing, it's a very different approach than the television. It's really exciting, almost novelistic. So we're doing a whole project with Mad Men. For that, what we realize is it's great to do a show at the time when something's going to end. And television series never ended, right? They just got canceled, or the people stopped. But now you're having the creators determine, like 2 years before, how to create a dramatic arc and determine exactly what's going to happen at the end and plan for it. And so Matt Weiner in Mad Men, he knows exactly what he's going to do in the next 8 episodes. They're shooting.
It's sort of like a serialized novel that Dickens did when they would release chapters, but they knew what the overall arc was.
And for me, the action and the creators. Steven Soderbergh was at the museum 2 weeks ago for other reasons, and he just basically said he's done with movies. He's doing everything now for television, behind the candelabra, but all sorts of new things. He doesn't want to deal. He said he doesn't want to deal with the bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, you can debate the quality of what has been done, but the point is that there's just exodus.
Well, people also, I think, the context is different. I mean, the thing that really interests, that kind of blew me away, Carl, was, first of all, I think it was, when did I come in the first time? Do you remember, was that 98 or something?
Yeah, we had drinks at a place
digital-
called Cafe Bar, around the corner from the museum, and it was like, so this idea of bringing Indicate to New York.
No, I'm talking about back in the 20th century. Way before Indicate. You had me over there, I think it was 98, 97, 98, 99,
Why?
99,
Why
somewhere
are
there.
you
You were having a symposium called The Digital
Oh, that.
Object with Sarah Diamond was there and
Yeah,
a
so
bunch
the
of other
Rockefeller
people.
Foundation gave us some money.
Was that the right year?
They gave us some
20th
money to
century.
have a symposium on the notion of collecting, or really on the very idea of digital media. We call it the digital object because behind all of this was sort of this idea that rather than time-based media, there is something object-like about it, bounded by a piece of software, and it was important for curators, institutions to think about what it means to collect this stuff.
It was very similar in some ways. We had talked then about the fact that when people were doing video art in the 70s, people like Bill Viola, for instance, how that was collected and shown, and like if it's an installation or if it's a VHS tape or beta or whatever the heck it was, sort of some similar issues came up in that period as well.
But I did give everyone an assignment, which was to bring in a digital object and talk about it and show it. What did you do?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I was going to
But
say.
I think somebody, maybe you,
Probably me, the What's Up videos.
the thing that I remember vividly, or maybe this is what I brought in, somebody brought in the All Your Base or Belong to Us
Yeah.
montage,
Yeah.
which was just, you guys ever seen that? It's amazing.
So-
They're very,
Well, I'm very pop, so there was a lot of art. Clay Shirky, who's a really smart guy and really kind of teaches at NYU. Do you know him?
yes.
He brought in
very
a,
well.
like
He's one of my heroes.
his object was DNA molecule, and it was really fun to see all these curators try to kind of outsmart each other. But it was like a show and tell, and it was great context for a seminar because usually we're just like blabbing away. And what I had done was I focused on something that turns out to be called a meme, but at the time didn't have a name. Starting with Dancing Baby, the idea that this content its significance is well beyond what you're seeing. It's really more, it's how it propagated through the network, and it's much about how people got it, how it got to people and what they did with it. So it was Dancing Baby, All Your Bases Belong to Us.
I think that might be
The
the
punchline was that, this is coming from a Sega video game with this mangled translation, and then people start realizing it with Photoshop images and all these different ways. And then at the end, you see it actually painted on a wall in the real world. So this idea that the meme kind of graduates into the real world. And then at the time, the trendy stuff was how people were taking this Budweiser ad that they was referred to as what's up ad and making their own versions. But again, it was at the time it was a wide variety of approaches. It wasn't just art people. That's why it's important to have you there. That it was arts, but was not art. Now that I look back, there were some people conspicuously missing who I just didn't know at the time. Lev Matovich slept through the first day, but he should have been there, and he was there. And these people didn't necessarily have there weren't these programs back then.
No, they were, I had just started working at USC when I came there, so that was my first academic appointment.
And that was unique, to have academic institutions begin to recognize this.
But it's interesting the relationship with the film and the TV, because the fact that you are now the executive director, I think is not insignificant. From the digital dude with the warehouse display on the 3rd floor, and now you're running the whole thing, right? And when I met you, you were working in the leaky basement under the Carson Television Building in the film school, which was just a total physical manifestation of where we were in the media hierarchy. Right? We were underneath television,
yeah.
Physically. It was like...
And the internet kind of blew this all out the water. I remember with the New York Times, they put their internet people in another building. Again, and
Right.
also, with rats and so on. And now they're running, the idea was you take the newspaper and then you make it, and then you create a version of it for the web.
Right.
So today, of course, the newspaper is a rendering of
Although every single day I get an email from the New York Times begging me to subscribe to the paper edition.
Yep, and make more money.
Begging me. But,
And you also, you should buy CDs.
oh, I still buy CDs.
Good
I'm
for
old
you.
school that way.
That's what keeps my wife in business. That's good.
But I think it's interesting that the change in status of these media over time, and the fact that, you know, this started as a film-oriented venue in a place where.
Give me the photo.
Yes. In located next, like where the film industry started, in Astoria. I mean, I think that was also, this is the Madden.
Again, the comfy couch, big screen, but the context of this is very different. But you're absolutely right, except film is still our anchor. And
Yeah.
you will not be able to go somewhere to see celluloid projected on a big screen other than a museum very soon. And so we show restored prints, we show archival prints, we show digital cinema. Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese prefer the digital transfers. But the point is that there's nothing like seeing a great movie on a big screen in a beautiful theater. And so as we move forward, we can't forsake where we came from. And the irony is, every museum's trying to market to you guys. What I mean by that is that just like with classical music and orchestras, audiences are aging, museum audiences are older, and they're looking for ways to be cool and trendy and so on. But what I love about our museum is we don't have to do that. We just have to do what we normally do because it is a very contemporary and approachable subject. In fact, our audience is too young because we need old people to give us money.
A couple of years ago, right around this time of year, I came into the lab and there were a bunch of students in here, and Marion was there, I think you were there, and I came in and I said, hey, you know, you've got this big TV here, you guys want to have an Oscar party in here? And there was this sort of long, pregnant pause, and then everybody just looked at me like I was crazy, and were like, yeah, we're not really into that. And I was thinking, wow, it's a totally generational thing. As people my age, it's a big deal to watch the Oscars, but it's really not a big deal.
It's terrible. They're terrible, and they're really they're
that?
going for the older. This is the original Madden
Oh
from 1988
my
on an
God.
Apple II. So the idea here was, okay, the Super Bowl's in New York and New Jersey, whatever they call it.
New Jersey,
We
whatever
were
they call
all
it.
grasping it. Sorry, it was cool. It was the whole thing, just the battle, and Chris Christie made it even more fun. Bridge, but we decided hey, let's do something related to the Super Bowl. We're on the Super Bowl host committee for some weird reason, and the idea was to do an NFL films series. But then I think it was at E3, and I ran it. The only time I've ever gone was at we felt they told us that Madden was going to be 25 years old in this year, and we were 25 years old. So that was interesting. So I proposed, and by the way, a lot of the stuff comes from the staff.
Anyone else here 25 years old?
Yeah, I imposed this. Wow, this was a real bear to do because it was the first time we ever showcased. What I felt was interesting was not what the curators were interested in, or Jason was interested in how EA just basically boxed out any competition by getting an exclusive license with the NFL for their games, and as a result, they could make the games crappy, with not much innovation because nobody had any choice, and that was great. My interest was in the notion of the franchise game. That is, this video game is more like a car, where every year the car gets slightly new features, new technologies.
Right.
They want you to upgrade, rather than more the artistic side of games. And yet, though, there's a huge amount of complexity under the hood with this stuff. And the fact that John Madden was approached by Trip Hawkins, who founded Electronic Arts around the idea of the sports games, inspired by his experience with Strat-O-Matic baseball. And the whole idea of asking someone like John Madden.
Baseball! I
Yeah.
can't believe you just said that!
Do we have it
Do you
lined
guys
up?
know what that is? Was there a digital version of it? We
Well,
used to
no,
play it
but
on paper.
But again, that was, Tripp had played it, and he said, let's make an electronic, so he made a baseball.
Have you
game.
guys played that?
It was not as good as trying.
Oh my God, it was a like paper and pencil grid
Yep.
baseball game. Oh my God, I'm sorry, I just had a flashback to the 80s.
But so, and to ask, to this idea of the personality attached to the game was different than just, there was a precedent, Larry Bird basketball, but it was just Larry Bird's name to sell stuff. What was interesting here is that Madden wanted to have a role in designing the game and making sure that it is as authentic as possible, because he hated video games. What he wanted was a tool to help him plan plays and do coaching and things like that. And so this came out in 1988. That's an Apple IIe, and the stuff doesn't age well. The problem with it just becomes kitsch in
We
a way.
age so much better than our technology.
All the, yeah, but we,
Yeah,
so
it's
we had
great.
some, there was some interesting stuff that, and then we had this event. It was very strange with Michael Vick and Cam Newton, and I don't know, it was just like this whole like, but all the fans came out, all the people dedicated. What's cool about Madden is it's like a subculture, and somebody, maybe it was, it might have been Sam, I think it was Sam from IndieCade.
Dan Roberts.
Yeah.
Not sure.
No, it was a journalist. It was Clive Thompson.
Clive Thompson, sure.
Yeah, very, unfortunately, refuses to write a video game. It was very good writing and thought about all this. And he loved this idea because he knows everything about video games, but decided that Madden and sports simulations are just way too complicated for him to ever even begin to try to figure out how to play them. So in a way, the idea of tackling this for us, again, was let's take something that is probably impossible to show, and it's really complex, and it's not your arcade version of the game, like NBA Jam or 10-Yard Fight, which is just a sort of stylized version of the sport, but actually tries to replicate its complexity. And it was very challenging, but in this case, we resorted to some interesting graphical approaches to show the game's evolution over time. So we took a number of projectors and lined them up and created a kind of digital timeline of the game.
Wow.
But instead of it being a timeline with static graphics, each year of the game,
It was a playable version?
No, this was passive on purpose.
Okay.
So the playable version here, this was using projections with the embedded. The graphics and the projection surfaces became one thing, and then essentially we also used the projector to put a spotlight on a part of the graphical wall that you should be paying attention to when you see the video. It was really, it was very clever. And so then EA, got together with Macy's, and Macy's wanted to put it in the store, and we said, that's as far as we go. And so the battle with EA was great. Like all this text about when the game sucked, or when they had when a player gets injured and the ambulance comes out, but then they decided the NFL got upset about it and they took it out. The licensing. We were given complete. Our contract was we have creative control. It could not be a commercial for this game. The marketing people, we're sort of we're not happy. But in the end, if it were a big commercial for the game, then the public would have smelled that, and it wouldn't be effective. We wanted it to be serious. So anyway, we also had this up when IndieCade was up on purpose.
Oh.
Two reasons. One is Electronic Arts paid for IndieCade.
Oh,
Indie
thank you,
Essentials.
Electronic
They just
Arts.
didn't know it, because we
Indie
went to them
Essentials.
and then we asked them for a bunch of money because they're not cool enough to pay for an independent game exhibit. We got enough dough from them. Don't tell me. It's not. It's
It's on
okay. It's a
video.
sponsorship fee, right? So it was, and I told them that that they're not paying for the exhibit. They're becoming a benefactor of the museum, and then we took some of that money, and obviously IndieCade raised the money for its participation, but we were able to raise the money for Indie Essentials in this interesting way. And that's some of you might go on to work for Electronic Arts, so I won't go any further into.
I don't think anyone in this room is
Okay.
just bound for electronic arts.
Good. Well, the folks at USC though, isn't that the case? So like,
Well, they might be teaching people who are bound for electronic arts in the near future. I'm just saying.
yeah, I mean, because the AEA gave them all a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so that's the question about, I mean, I'm really
But they
interested.
didn't give us any money.
Right, well, that's
Not
probably.
1 cent.
That's good. No, this is not a feeder
All
into
of
the
this,
commercial
this
game
mighty
industry.
empire here was built with no corporate sponsorship whatsoever.
But
I've
no one
gotten
need
donated
their,
games.
these these companies are toast.
Actually, I should say EA has sent us free games on multiple
Yeah.
occasions, so they have supported us in that.
But now there's the opportunity to just make something on your own and have millions of people anyway.
Exactly.
You don't need the intermediary.
Them anymore.
And that's really, really exciting because that wasn't the case before.
So, it is a little after 6. We're sort of, we didn't really have a timeline on this, but I thought we should give people a few, I mean, you
Sure.
covered everything I was gonna ask you about anyway, so I think we're good there. Does anyone have any questions or comments or? Yes.
Yeah, sorry I missed the first part of the talk. I noticed you have built this interactive experience in your museum. So I am a student working with Smart Grid L. My name is Albert Lee. We're interested in using artificial intelligence to enhance those interactive experiences. So do you have any, so when you design for these experiences, do you feel any part of that should become smarter? Like, if we can adapt to some of the user's responses, behaviors, if the user does this, you can say, oh, it doesn't like this part of the game, let's change it to some other stuff.
Based on the user's input.
Yeah, it could be like
That
that.
sounds expensive, but no, we've designed really simple interactive experiences that immerse the visitor in the creative process of making moving images. We have the digital animation stand that we have is basically a stop motion system using physical objects. Really important to have that physicality for your stuff. Using digital to simulate physical is problematic, and we're going through this now with the Jim Henson exhibit we're doing, which is if you want to teach people about puppetry for television, you can't use digital puppetry as a stand-in. You have to actually have physical puppets. Or
Well,
else
that's why you're here to meet with the puppetry arts people.
we're yeah, well,
Oh, I was trying to figure that out. Why is
I'm not here to meet with them. I'm here to deal with this other thing.
Oh, but then you're
involving
meeting
the
with them,
library
yeah.
software. But anyway, the point is that the same thing with artificial intelligence for us. We would probably rather have an exhibit about the technology you're developing than we would in
Using
utilizing the technology in the exhibit, but many other museums would. Like if a museum is teaching somebody about some other topic, like a natural history museum or so on, all these great technologies
Have you seen
should be
the
utilized.
thing that ICT did for the Smithsonian? It's these 2 characters called Grace and Ada that are AI characters that are designed to teach people about AI. You might want to take a look at that.
What was that game? That interactive experience where it has someone's name also, you're conversing with this character in their apartment. It came out of here, anyway.
You're talking about
somewhere in here.
Facade?
Facade, thank you.
Yeah, that's Michael Matthias
Right.
did that, yeah. It didn't come out here, he did it before he came here, but yeah.
Somewhere in Europe or something. And so it's like that, yeah, I mean, I think that my concern, I like the idea of the uniformity of experience, of everyone being, it's interesting, if everyone, it's like this whole idea that now all of our news is personalized and we're not reading what other people are reading, or I'm watching MSNBC and you're watching Fox. And the commonality of the experience isn't necessarily there. I think in educational software, it's critical to adjust and adapt to the way people are interacting. And to the extent that educational experiences are in museums, it could be the same thing. Ours are different because we're actually saying, okay, how do you do sound editing? So you actually play the role of a sound editor. So we want it to be to mirror what it is that this professional does in that creative process. And if it's a what we've done is we've had to dumb things down, frankly, to make sure that everyone can do it, rather than have that
But that's
some of these
behavioral.
advanced levels that could open up once someone demonstrates mastery. So that'd be pretty cool.
Like
So,
behavioral is very dumbed down version of playing guitar.
yeah, yeah.
Actually, it has nothing to do with playing guitar. Do you play guitar?
No.
Guitar Hero is a completely false simulation of
Yep.
guitar playing. It's actually, yeah, this
Well,
is.
it doesn't teach you how to play guitar.
There's a very common, I have a friend who's in the music business, and it's a common joke that musicians cannot play their own music on Guitar Hero. They try and they can't do
Well,
it.
but it
It's
depends on what you
totally-
mean by dumbed down. It's definitely not a simulation of playing guitar, but I think it is,
It's an abstraction of playing guitar, but it's.
that's a form of dumbing down. I mean, it's like all the surface.
But
It's
it's
all that,
not.
you know.
But it's, the core mechanic of it is totally different from playing guitar.
Well, it's like playing the drums using a guitar interface. It's almost all, it's rhythmic. So actually, the part of guitar, if you play Band Hero or Rock Band, the drum simulation is more like playing the
The
drums
drum simulation
than any
is
other
quite accurate.
instruments.
I had a student last semester make a physical rock band simulation with a real drum set. He went out by the student center, and he set his drums up, and he painted drew in chalk on the pavement the Guitar Hero track. And as people walked toward him, he would hit the drums with the particular stripe they
I
were
accidentally
on.
played that.
You stepped on it by mistake.
And then what he did was he let other people play the drums while people were walking across. Yeah, it was awesome. It was like an analog adaptation of drum kit guitar.
And it would be wonderful if in Guitar Hero, as you ascend to these different levels, or some other software, that by the end of it, you actually can play guitar, versus these games where it's not the case at all.
Bobby, did you have a question?
Yes. So when you originally acquired your arcade cabinets in '89, you know, you said you got some with bad boards and art and the marquees are different, those kinds of things. Where did the cabinets come from?
At that point, we got a lot of them from arcades that were closing. Because that was the
When they outlawed video game arcades in New York.
well, that I think there was a period. Does anyone remember when Mortal Kombat came out? Maybe that was a little bit later, 92. I don't know. There was the arcades kind of boxed themselves in also because they began to market to a narrower group of more dedicated players with the fighting games, and then yes, all sorts of.
Yeah, because
real
I think
estate
that
issues
was right
came
around the
into play.
time when they had the ban in New York City. Because when I was working for Ed Schlossberg and we were making the game nightclub and all the games, we had to rezone it as a bowling alley because they wouldn't allow video game arcades in New York.
Was
So-
it specifically video game arcades? I'm sorry, I don't know the specifics
Arcades,
of that law.
pinball too, just game
And
arcades.
pinball.
Pinball
Okay.
and video game arcades, but it was the video games that caused the law to happen. And the idea was, oh, it's all these teenage boys and they're gonna get in fights and it's, you know, I mean, it's the same cycle that happened with some arcade stuff in the 20s and 30s with Prohibition. I mean, playing is very nefarious in America.
Right, when actually it often acted as, could be seen as an outlet
Yeah.
as well. But we, everything was very inexpensive, which was great, and we picked up some things like Death Race, which are,
Did you
there's
see,
so
by the way,
few
the
of them right
pinball
now.
behind you?
Uh-huh.
Did you happen to see that? That belongs to one.
That's very good. So it was there, and again, we also hired the companies that repair video games for arcades to fix or repair the game. They knew nothing about, you know, there's not the whole idea of restoration, or they just fixed them, and that was all we had. And then over time, finally, you know, there are people who
Now restore.
they use the original equipment that they will rebuild the I don't want to say rebuild the chips, but you know, put the data in the microprocessors. I mean, it's just amazing.
I actually own a horizontal pong table from like the pizza parlor model. It's in the back of a garage and somebody needs to fix it, but it's like sitting there, just.
Yeah, the sit down game, we have the rest your beer on a game. Atari football was my favorite. We still have it somewhere.
Where do you keep
grapefruit
these
sized
games in your
trackball, but,
collection?
we have a collection storage facility, and I mean, we have certain things we want to deaccession. By the no, not the video games though. Actually, we they're among, I think we have things like David Letterman's desk. That again, I was not the director at the time. When he moved from NBC to CBS, they called us and say, "Hey, we have David Letterman's desk." Sure, bring it on. Talk about irrelevant. I mean, to have something so big to stand in for what could be a sentence, which is David Letterman left NBC and went to CBS. There's nothing unique about its design. Anyway, the point is that we have a lot of very big things, but the arcade games, basically, the storage facility we're using has actually, it's like those car parks
With
that have
shelves,
the two
yeah.
levels. So a lot of the games are high up, and we're very serious about this stuff. So we have to take regular condition reports. We took our Cubert to one of these companies way back when, to just repair games, and it came back without its motherboard. Someone took it out. We didn't know. It's like the people stealing other people's kidneys. And it's very sad because it's Cubert. And then now we can mix and match. So we have a little display now in our core exhibition just of Ralph Baer recreated his original, what they call brown box, which became the basis for the Magnavox Odyssey. And it's playable.
And it's got the like weird wood grain thing on it.
Which is like
Fake
paper. And also we have a recording. He actually did this craziest thing for the brown box. He called it TV game unit number 2. It's metal, and at least the buttons on it. First of all, it had a pump controller. He thought that some of the games that people would design would involve pumping. And his demo was of a house on fire, and you have to put the water in it before. And then the second thing he did is he actually recorded his voice digitally, and you could press a button on the machine, and it would be him narrating what happens in the system, because it was a demo that he was giving to his bosses at this military contractor. That was, wanted to show that technology. So we have all that stuff. The point is then we go in this little display, we were looking more at the birth of games at the time. And so we'll mix and match, like for a while there when we had Space War, we had to, in our permanent exhibition, do something different. So we did, it was, again, this is not for, you could do this in a second, but conceptually, but actually to get the games out and display them and make them work. It was something like, I forgot the order, but it was Centipede, Frogger, Hubert, Pac-Man, sort of ending there. Centipede is one of the most violent video games ever made, actually. In a lot of
And it
ways.
has a female co-designer too.
The sad
We
thing
have an
is,
XYZ.
yeah, but it's so intense. Anyway, people think of it as a cute game because it takes place in the garden. Anyway, the point is that we were showing these games that were a little bit, that were as different as possible from the games in Space War. And how many times people would use Frogger as a metaphor for so many different games in the world. It's still, what's amazing now is that young people.
We play it right in front of the building all the time.
Well, that's what Atlanta, my God, how do you cross the street? But it's as educational tools to teach the basics of game design. This stuff is really, really useful. And then you should tell us what tools should we use to get middle and high school students in our camps and other courses involved in making games, because we've been using Scratch for way too long. It's fine.
Well, you could use Unity.
And it's not exactly open source, is that true? Could someone make a game design tool that's simpler within Unity? Like a subset?
That's a great idea. Let's get a grant and do it. I think we should probably wrap it up, but thanks to everyone. This was awesome.
You're
It
welcome.
was fantastic. Thank you so much.
And we
This
have
is-
a very vibrant
give
summer
this-
internship program.
If you give this good of a talk with no preparation, I can't wait to see what you do when you actually prepare for it.
I dance.
Summer internships, anyone? Send me.
Obviously, you look on our website, but
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll
we
send it
don't
around.
just, everyone who we bring in does projects related to their areas of interest and expertise. So it's not like we just throw people in there. It's about 10 people a summer.
That sounds great. I'll do it.
Okay.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming. Please eat the food, and if you like smoothies, take a cup of fruit home.
Thank you. Thank you for